Kuuluuko nyt? Jes, hyvä. Tervetuloa kaikille täällä paikan päällä ja kaikille siellä kotikatsomoissa. Tänään meillä on BlackRockilta tullut ei yksi, vaan kaksi asiantuntijaa. Meillä on täällä Maarja Vaikla ja Isabella Chami ja he kertoo nyt sitten tänään, että miten sijoitetaan ETFien kautta megatrendeihin kestävästi. Please welcome on the stage Maarja and Isabella.
No niin, hyvää iltaa ja tervetuloa. Did I say that right? At least, well, a warm welcome to everyone. Oh, perfect, thank you. And I think I'll keep it in the language that I do speak. My name is Maarja Vaikla, and this is my colleague Isabella Chami. And we are part of the local BlackRock team based in Copenhagen. And we're delighted to be here tonight as part of the partnership that BlackRock has together with Nordnet. And I do realize that I've already mentioned BlackRock a few times, but I realized also that not everybody knows about BlackRock. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes on where we come from before we really start the presentation. So who is BlackRock? We are actually the world's largest asset manager. And you might ask, what does that mean? Well, we manage $7 trillion. And I don't know how much money you have, but I at least couldn't really relate to that. So I did some Googling for you, and that is equivalent to 28 times Finland's GDP, or then half of Japan's. So that gives you at least some perspective. But I do just wanted to say it in a very humble way, because BlackRock still wants to be very local. So we have an office in Stockholm, in Copenhagen, maybe soon in Helsinki, who knows. Enough about BlackRock, that was just to give you some perspective on where we come from. So, what are you here for tonight? We're going to talk about what is an ETF. Sorry, do you guys see? Okay, good. We're going to look at why are ETFs becoming so popular. And then finally, we're going to see how you can invest in megatrends and more specifically sustainable investing in ETFs. So I hope you're all excited about that. And I also realized that sometimes, you know, when I mention ETFs, megatrends, sustainable ETFs, you know, that can be a mystery, but hopefully that will be solved tonight, and we'll also stay after this session if you have any questions. All right. So what is an ETF? So the best way is really to think about what it stands for. So it's a short name for exchange traded funds. So basically you can think about it as index funds that you can trade on the exchange. So you can really think about it as the best out of the two worlds. Yeah, the best of index funds and the best out of stocks that they're traded on exchange. So if you combine those two things, you get diversified index funds that are traded on exchange like stocks. And that's what an ETF is. And I tried to think about how to make it even more concrete for you. So let's say we would have an ETF for the Finnish stock market. It would make sense that this ETF followed the Helsinki OMX 25 index. So this ETF would then contain all the underlying 25 stocks. So it would be Elisa, Sampo, Nokia. Well, you know them better than I do. So in one purchase, you would get access to all those 25, if that would be an ETF. So that's what an ETF is. But then the question is, why have they become so popular? What is the buzz around them? Why do we read more and more about these ETFs? I found some news articles based from this local newspapers, but also some other papers that have written about it. And the answer to the question about the popularity is really about the structure that I just mentioned, because that leads to certain characteristics that makes investors use them more and more and see them as good investment tools. So here we have them. And if I would wake you up in the middle of the night, these are really the 5 things I would like you to remember. Don't worry, I won't come after you. But this is really the key thing, why we think, you know, ETFs are good investment vehicles. So I'll walk through each one of them. We have transparency, first of all. So we kind of believe what you see is what you get. So all the underlying holdings in an ETF, the country exposure, sector exposure, currency, everything is available on our website, and it's updated daily. And this really, gives a lot of investors comfort. You know, you can download to Excel, you can compare it. It's very transparent. Second of all, cost effective. If you take the example I had before, obviously it is more cost efficient to buy one ETF than going and buying all the 25 underlying stocks, assuming you would do it for the OMX Helsinki 25. And another key point is also that all you in here pay the same price as would the Finnish state pension fund, the Norwegian oil petroleum funds, whomever. So private or professional, doesn't matter. And this is really a great vehicle then for private investors to get access to a tool that can be used by both individuals or professional investors. We have diversification. We touched upon it already, but of course you can buy one ETF, but you can also combine different ETFs, and you can also combine ETFs, single stocks, bonds, but at least it gives you more diversification in one purchase. We have flexibility. Once again, ETFs are traded on stock exchange. So whenever the stock market is open, you can trade them. And this is really something that has become more and more important because we live in a quite volatile world. We have Trump, the tweets. We have the overall US-China relationship. We had Brexit. There's a lot of things moving. And investors do want to, get in and out quickly, which is a big difference when it comes to, for example, index funds, where it usually takes a couple of days whilst you invest or also to get your money back to your account. And then lastly, we have the additional liquidity. And that really kind of makes the ETF a bit unique because you have the liquidity of the underlying stocks, but then you of course also have the liquidity when you trade or exchange. So these are really the 5 kind of key characteristics or how do you say, things that make ETFs very, very sufficient and easy tools to have in your toolbox. But now I see maybe some confused faces thinking, okay, ETFs, great, popular, good, but maybe what does then this have to do with the megatrends and sustainable investing? Kind of maybe the key thing that you're here for tonight. Okay, so let's look into that. So now I thought we'll move more into the megatrends part. We'll look into how we define thematic investing, and then we'll also look into some of the megatrends that we see, and then we'll end by actually some concrete sustainable ETFs and examples of that. So first of all, the question, what is thematic investing? So it's really about long-term investing into structural changes, so structural themes. And I'll get back to that, so don't worry. But the key part is that these are driven by key megatrends. And megatrends are really those things that will change our lives for the next 10, 20, 30 years ahead of us. So really the long-term changes. And these are the 5 megatrends that BlackRock has identified together with some other researchers and also professionals within this field. So we can walk through each one of them. First one, climate change and resource scarcity. I think all of you probably agree with me that this is happening and we can notice it and we'll probably feel the effect in the future as well. Isabella will later on touch upon some statistics showing how this really is accelerating this megatrend. We have demographics and social change. So as we all know, people grow older, but also the population size is increasing. So this really means, it puts pressure on how we think about our societies, how we think about our infrastructure, and how we build new cities. So that's going to change going forward in the future. We have technological breakthrough, and that is really something that underpins probably all the megatrends and really leads to this acceleration. I think, every day when we open the newspaper, there is a new technological breakthrough that makes change differences and also enhances developments quicker and quicker. We have rapid urbanization, meaning people move from smaller towns into bigger cities. Once again, that means that it puts pressure on our community, how we were going to build our houses, how we're going to make them more efficient, maybe think about the climate, waste resources, all that. So that's going to change also in the future. And then finally, we have changing economic power. And here I read an interesting study by PwC saying that in 2050, so in approximately 30 years' time, 7 out of the 10 biggest economies in the world will be emerging market. That's different from what it looks now. Well, these are at least the megatrends we identified. So now I want to go back to what I mentioned before, that the thematic investing is driven by structural themes, so long-term changes. But the question is then, so what is the opposite to that? So I just wanted to shed some light on the differences, because that is obviously the cyclical themes. And that is most commonly known as monetary changes, business changes, some of the things that, you know, we have economic growth, recession, the things that affect asset prices, valuation, interest rates. So it's still long-term, but not long-term in the way that we think when we think about thematic investing. Because as I said, thematic investing is really about the structural long-term change. And I'm actually going to pause here because now I want you to think about a megatrend, so the technological megatrend, and how that has changed the way you kind of live your life today. Some scary faces, don't worry. I want you to think about your cell phone usage. So how you use your mobile phone or cell phone today compared to how you did it 15 years ago, 15. And whilst you think about that, I can mention that the first iPhone or smartphone was launched 2007. So 15 years ago, we didn't even have a smartphone. And I mean, if I think about my daily usage, I wake up to my smartphone, I have my work there, I have my newspaper, I have my bus tickets, recipes, pay my bills. I mean, you name it, everything is here. 15 years, this wasn't possible. And it basically has changed the way we live our lives. And this was a very concrete and simple example, but just to get your minds going in terms of how we think about the structural change ahead of us. And this was a simple example, but I mean, if we think about more historically, and we think about how urbanization and how technology has affected that, together with the methods of transport that we use. So 150 years ago, we used horses as the main method of transport. Then we had the invention of the combustion engine, and that led to the motor car. But I found a quite a funny story by Henry Ford, so the guy who created Ford cars. He did a survey in 1907 where he asked some potential users, what would be, or how would you want to improve your method of transport? Do you know what the people said? We need faster horses. Because obviously that's the only thing they knew. They didn't know about a car or anything. So this just shows, you know, how this unprecedented change is happening. And before we know it, we're already there. And yeah, 20 years later, obviously, animals were made obsolete. And the questions we ask today, you know, if you fast forward 100 years, will our children be owning their own car? What sort of car will it be? Is it a combustion engine or completely some sort of different, you know, fuel system? And maybe thirdly, you know, will it be driving at all? Or is there a different method, how they're going to take themselves forward? And the key question here is then, how do you invest today to capture these trends? And that is thematic investing. So, oh yeah, I actually had another, because obviously thematic investing is a lot about statistics. And this was also quite interesting. So in 1946, less than, well, 0.01% of Americans had a TV set at home. Fast forward 14 years, 90% had a TV set. And I mean, if you think about our usage today, or I remember like back when I was a kid, you know, the dinner had to end at 8 because the news started at 8:15. You know, nowadays it's on demand. It's, you know, the TV doesn't follow you, you follow, or we follow what we want to do, the TV doesn't follow you. So it's all happening. We have Netflix on demand, you know, it's a different world. So the key question is then, so why now? Why are we talking about it now? And that is because these mega trends that we spoke about, they are accelerating at a much faster pace than we've ever seen before. We're going to touch upon some statistics just because it is really becoming apparent. And it's all mainly led by the technology that we see. But also if you think about urbanization, so some interesting statistics that next year, 50% of Asian citizens will be living in the big urban areas for the first time. Can you imagine what that's going to make, you know, in terms of the society, the community, how we would really need to think about our resources? And the second point is, of course, that we had the UN climate talks this weekend. It's top agenda priority all the time. And Greta Thunberg, the Swede, she is pushing quite hard. So we know that there is change happening. And this will change also how we're going to live our lives in the future. And Bella, here I think you have some interesting statistics on what is really happening and also then leading on to the sustainability theme.
Yes. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you very much, Maarja. And just to emphasize what Maarja just mentioned, we've actually seen 17 out of the 18 hottest years we've ever been able to measure happening and occurring since year 2000. So change is definitely and undoubtedly happening, and people are willing to do something about it. Societies are changing. Every day we can read about news about everything from climate change, but also to governance, ethical decisions, and labor conditions. And this is something that governments around the world are also increasingly pushing for and making sure that businesses incorporate this into their business models. We've seen ESG, and just to define ESG for the people who are not familiar with the term, stands for environmental, social, and governance. And this is the general kind of description when we talk about sustainable investing. And we've seen this as a trending topic, just as here, the Twitter account mentioning ESG has grown 19 times in the past 5 years. But this is not only something on the internet. This is also something, if you look at the average company in the S&P 500 index, they're increasing the usage of ESG and ESG-related terms to mention it actually 10 times per conference call a day. And this is up from 6 times just a decade ago. So this is something that is becoming increasingly topical, and this is not something new. This is what people talk about right now. Looking at consumer behavior, when we survey consumer habits, we've seen that 73% of consumers are willing to change their habits to actually make a positive impact on the environment. And this also goes beyond consumer choice. The World Economic Forum posted a 2019 global risk report where the global business community said that extreme climate change and extreme weather and failure to incorporate climate policy are the biggest threats to their businesses, looking over a 10-year horizon. So this is definitely something that we see. I think if you just look at that. Let's see if we can get this updated. Anyways, I will just continue and we'll see if the slides are following on. We at BlackRock, we actually project the market for sustainable assets in exchange-traded funds to grow to 400 billion in 10 years. Let's see here. Yes, exactly. Let me just rewind a little bit here. So going back, when people actually want to do something about this, you can climate compensate by either taking the train instead of flying to your destination. You could go to your local supermarket and buy organic food or locally produced goods instead of buying traditional ones. But what we see increasingly is that people want to put money to work and invest in sustainable solutions. And on the back of this, we've seen the growth of sustainable funds in Europe grow with 5,436 new sustainable funds in the last 5 years. And here coming to the point that we at BlackRock see that the exchange-traded fund market in sustainable assets will go to $400 billion within the next 10 years. And to put this in perspective, we're at $43.2 billion in the sustainable exchange-traded fund market today. But if we look at this overview and see the historical development, we can see that we've grown from 6.4 billion in 2015 to 43.2 billion today. This is a compounded annual growth rate of 46.5% a year. And yeah, you can hear that's quite a lot, and we don't see anything that will stop this from actually grow even more than this in the future. So what's driving this change, and what is driving the growth of sustainable assets? Well, we at BlackRock have identified 3 primary drivers of change. And the first one is performance. Today, when we have increased research into this topic, and we look at back-tested data, we see that the historical assumption that we made that you have to make a trade-off of performance when you actually invest with your values, it's not necessarily true. And we'll look at this data, you can see that ESG portfolios and sustainable investings actually have performed as the market or beaten the market. So this is the first driver of growth in this market. We also see that increased research into this area make analysis of the data much easier to comprehend, and we can actually measure the outcome of shifting assets into sustainable funds. We will touch upon this a little later, but we will see that we can measure exactly the impact you have when you invest sustainably. The third point we want to mention here is that regulation is increasing in this area as well. Just as an example, in France, they have a regulation now that asset owners are required to post the carbon emission and carbon footprint of their assets. And this is something that we're discussing in the Swedish market as well, where the pension funds are required to post sustainability reports. So these 3 points are really the drivers of growth. But when we talk about sustainable investing, what really is that, and how can you actually invest sustainably, and what does that mean? So we normally talk about you can either go the avoid way or the advance way. So the first way is to avoid certain sectors or industries that are harmful to the environment. So for instance, you screen out and you make exclusionary screens from thermal coal, for instance, or companies that doesn't live up to the UN Global Compact Act, that you then just take out from the index and you invest in a screened portfolio. You can also go the advanced way, where you align your capital with values and you actually want to make an impact with your investment. And just to go over shortly what we have at BlackRock and the exchange-traded funds that we offer in these different categories, we have something called the ESG screened range, where we make 7 screens from industries and sectors that we consider harmful. And that's the only thing. So if you're not very familiar with ESG or sustainable investing, the ESG screened range is kind of a first step to have this ESG aspect. The second range that we have is the ESG Enhanced Range. And this goes into the advanced category and more ESG investing. So not only do you have 7 screens, the same 7 screens that we have on the ESG screen range, but you also have an optimizer to minimize the tracking or performance. So this will closely track the benchmark index. It will also choose the top ESG performers in the index. When we come to the spectra of the SRI range, that's what we call the best-in-class range. So if you're very comfortable with ESG investing and you feel like, this is really something I believe in, and this is what I want to do, and I want to invest where I really see my values go, then we see a lot of investors going for the SRI range. This has 11 exclusionary screens, so a few more than the 2 previous ranges. This also looks at ESG scores and ESG controversy scores, and it rebalances on a quarterly basis. So companies really have to keep up the good work to be able to stay in this index. When you go a little further on the spectra, we have something called thematic investing. So that was what Maarja spoke about earlier, about the megatrends. And it's more specifically focusing on one aspect of either the E, the G, or the E, S, and the G. So we have, for instance, Clean Energy Fund, and we have an Inclusion and Diversity ETF that tracks companies that have broad diversity of their board of directors, for instance, because we believe that's a driver of performance. When we come to impact investing, that's something that you need to have a target for. And when you have an impact fund, you want to have a measurable target of that fund. And in terms of, I can just show you on this next slide what I spoke about in terms of exposures, but we don't have an exchange-traded fund on the impact investing field strategy right now, but that's something we're, of course, continuously innovating in. But we have a global green bond index fund available. So coming back to the point about data and the increased data quality, we can actually get when a lot more research is done in this field. We have an internal team at BlackRock that looks at statistics and measures differences between funds. And they actually did a pretty cool, thorough analysis on the impact you would have by shifting assets from a traditional portfolio into a sustainable portfolio. And they saw by looking at the screened range, the first one I mentioned, you would reduce carbon emissions with 32%, which is equal to 164 barrels of oil or 84 acres of forest. When they did the same example with our SRI fund and the SRI range, they saw a 34 reduction of the carbon emissions, which is equal to driving 274,437 kilometers with a normal car. And that's almost 7 times around the world. So that's quite impactful. And in the same way, they saw it's equivalent to charging almost 9 million smartphones. So you can have a very tangible and real effect by actually shifting into sustainable investments. So if we want to leave you with 3 key takeaways in terms of sustainable investing, it's, first of all, it's happening right now. Money is really moving into this direction, and we see an increase in these type of funds also in the future. Secondly, in terms of choice and transparency, we see both regulatory push in terms of that businesses must be much more transparent and disclose a lot more data and ESG metrics, but also just as an example on iShares and BlackRock funds, we publish on our website all ESG metrics and exposures to different sectors on each fund product page. You can go in and look at this and evaluate for yourself and make an informed choice. And the last point is the investor outcomes, what we just went through. With this kind of tangible analysis we can do, we can see what exact effect will your investment have and what impact will you have on the environment by choosing a different type of investment. So that's actually what we wanted to present for you today in terms of megatrends and sustainable investing. And if you have any questions regarding this or exchange-traded funds, we're welcoming any questions. If you want to add something, Maarja, or?
No. I'm very happy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Voidaan tosiaan ottaa kysymyksiä tällä mikrofonin välityksellä, niin nostakaa vaan lapaa pystyyn, niin mä tuon mikrofonia tarjolla. Ja kaikki, jotka on siellä laitteidensa ääressä, niin sieltä voi myös pistää kysymyksiä tulee. Mä otan täältä näin, koska näköjään live-yleisöstä kukaan ei uskalla ainakaan vielä kysyä mitään, niin otetaan täältä. Eli we have one question from the stream.
Yeah.
How do you define a sustainable fund?
So that's a great question, and one of the problems generally has been that ESG is very individual how you define it, and that's also been why it's been so difficult to find data and to consolidate data. But more and more consolidation in this industry has made it easier to make this kind of analysis. And we defined sustainability and ESG with those terms that we went through really quickly in the beginning, but firms that focus on environmental, social, or have very strong governance structures. yeah, I'm not sure how detailed you want the answer to be, but that's primarily the definition, and that's what we're looking at when we're evaluating companies.
And maybe to add on that, so obviously here we've covered the kind of most of the ETF part, so it's very much a passive investment. So how we define the ESG or sustainable investing in this world, it is actually very systematic. We have a lot of details on it, but it's quite thorough. It's, you know, like Isabella mentioned beginning, it's 7 kind of big sectors that we are excluding and companies that fall into that. Or if you go into the advanced, it is both the exclusionary part, but also you optimize on the ESG. So it's a very thorough and systematic process.
So if it would have been an active fund, for instance, a portfolio manager would have the discretion to decide and have more authority over the process. But exactly what Maarja said, as an exchange-traded fund looks to track an index, the index provider that we work with here is MSCI. So this is also done in collaboration with the index provider.
So another one, do you have statistics about the average life cycle of an ETF?
So do you mean how many years the fund has been?
Yeah, I guess so.
So for our sustainable range, so we launched the ESG screened range, I think it was in 2018.
Yeah.
And then we've added on with the enhanced range, I think earlier this year, actually in March 2019. The SRI range has been live for a few years now. But the first ETF ever, if we don't look at the sustainable range, I think the ETF market, when you look at historical, was 2000. So it's been around for almost 20 years now.
And maybe to add on the topic, I mean, like we were talking impact investing. Obviously, there is no ETFs there yet. But this is really a field that is developing. I mean, these ranges, like, they didn't just pop up as mushrooms. There's a lot of research going on behind there. And it's basically client-driven. You know, what do we see? Where's the need? I mean, is water going to become a very scarce resource in the future? Maybe we need to develop that fund. So even though it's passive, we do work actively with research and to see where we have the gaps. So going on, like in the future, impact obviously is a field that we're looking into.
All right, so anyone in the audience? Hey, there's one.
Thanks for the new presentation. I was looking from Nordnet's website, the ETFs that BlackRock is offering there for, let's say, healthcare, climate change, water scarcity, etc. And when looking at the Morningstar ratings and then also the responsibility ratings given by Morningstar to these ETFs, they weren't that great actually. So none of them got like in the responsibility rating five stars, and then also the performance of the ETFs was not very, like, for example, compared to the S&P 500, it was actually almost all of them were below that performance. So how would you comment on, first of all, the methodology? Is there a difference between, let's say, Morningstar and BlackRock, and then also on the performance?
I think initially on Morningstar, I'm not aware how their rating works. I don't know if you have input to that. But like, so that is their evaluation. It's like S&P, you know, their own evaluation method. In terms of the track record, we have to keep in mind, of course, that these funds are rather new. So the historical, there's not that much historical data. For the S&P one, for example, if you would compare S&P and our USA fund, that is actually 2 different exposures. So I think it's important to compare, you know, apples to apples. So we would need like an S&P, SRI, or ESG screened. But we've actually seen, so we did a campaign on the screened version, kind of why not? So the thing is that we compared the performance of our non-screened versus the screened. And that was the team that Isabella mentioned before. And it actually turned out that there was actually a little slight outperformance even, which actually shouldn't be there because it's passive investing. So that's also something to keep in mind, that when you look at, you know, performance compared to, I don't know, some other benchmark or an active fund, this is just to be as its benchmark, would be my comment.
Yes, exactly. I agree with Maarja. So exactly to that point. an exchange-traded fund the aim of it is to track a benchmark index. So even if it outperforms the index, that's seen as a negative aspect because you really want to have a very tight tracking error. So and exactly, we don't have an S&P 500 ESG ETF yet. So comparing that kind of exposure, you need to make sure to compare the ETF with the index that it's actually supposed and designed to track to make an accurate comparison in terms of performance.
But maybe I can add on to that because that is data related. And obviously one big issue in this whole sustainability thing has been that we've not had that much data. But on our website, and back to the transparency part, we do actually have a column now showing different ESG scores, ESG metrics provided by MSCI on our funds, which you could look into if you're interested.
So I'll take another one from the internet. When will iShares launch a cannabis ETF?
We do get the question often, like why wouldn't we launch the complete reverse? So everything that we exclude, can't we include it? I think it comes down to values and what we think, is important for us as a company as well, and not only about revenue and capturing, what's the trend. So obviously I can't speak on what the developers are doing, but sustainability is the key thing, and that's what we believe is the strongest growth. So I wouldn't think that we get the opposite kind of ETF. There is one out there, though, if you're interested, but BlackRock's not going to get one of those, I think.
Okay. Are these ETF products protected from various counterparty risks?
Yes, so just to mention a little bit about the structure of ETFs. So I know that Maarja mentioned there's a lot of different media outlets that post news about exchange-traded funds, but it's very easy to have a misconception and misinterpret what an exchange-traded product is. So what we do at BlackRock, we categorize it as an exchange-traded fund, which can either be physically replicated or a synthetic replicated. That's actually a swap structure. It could be an exchange-traded note. That's also an exchange-traded currency. That's a debt instrument. And everything else is an exchange-traded instrument. And that's a very unregulated market. So when you look at an exchange-traded fund, and what BlackRock does and what we only have in our iShares is physically replicated exchange-traded fund. These are regulated by UCITS, and we actually own all the underlying assets. So when you buy an S&P 500 ETF, just to make an example, you actually are exposed to the physically shares in that fund. So if you would buy a synthetic ETF, or for instance a leveraged ETF, I don't know if you've seen some of those that are on the market, they're much more exposed to counterparty risk and also a completely different risk profile in general. So it's very important to understand the structure of the ETF and instrument you're buying to make sure that you're limited to the counterparties and the structural risks that inherent in the actual exchange-traded product. If that answers the question.
So there's a couple of questions on how to buy these, but our broker here, Teemu, will show it in a minute. But there's one question that can you specify a few ESG-oriented ETFs? Maybe like give examples or...
Yes, of course. I think we have, I'm not sure, I probably did a little fast forward here, but we have regional exposures in our ESG ranges, in our SRI range. So we have broad MSCI USA ESG screened ETFs. We have a world exposure, Europe, emerging markets, Japan, and EMU in terms of the screen range. And we have actually the same exposures when we come to the enhanced range, and similar exposures when they come to the SRI and best-in-class range. And there we also have a few more fixed income exposures to add on to that kind of best-in-class range. And this is also very easy to find on our webpage, and you can also find everything on Nordnet. So if you just search for iShares and SRI, you should be able, or ESG screened or ESG enhanced, you should be able to navigate on our webpage to find all the relevant funds.
Thank you. Is there any questions in the live audience? All right then. Well, thank you, Maarja and Isabella.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now our broker Teemu will show you how to buy these ETFs from our service, from Nordnet's website. Tässä kun meidän Teemu kirjautuu sisään palveluun, niin voidaan jutella mukavia. Onko jotain kysyttävää tässä vaiheessa? Ihan Suomessakin voidaan ottaa. Joo, kyllä ne itse asiassa tuossa striimissä näkyy ja mä voin kysästä tuosta Daamelta vielä, että jos saadaan ihan pistää jakoonkin, niin katsotaan, jos saadaan slaidit sitten ihan yleiseen jakoonkin. Ja tosiaan vielä jos Teemun esityksen jälkeen löytyy kysyttävää, niin voidaan toki ottaa vastauksia sekä Teemulta että BlackRockin edustajilta vielä tämänkin jälkeen.
Toi Tuomas OK tuossa screenillä nyt. Joo, terve. Mä oon Teemu Åkerblom ja meklarina tuossa asiakaspalvelussa ja käydään läpi vähän tuota verkkosivua, että mistä noi löytyy sieltä ja voidaan ensin katsoa vähän, että mistä nuo tuotteet löytyisi tarkemmin. Eli mennään tuonne pörssit ja markkinat -osioon ja sieltä toi ETF-sijoitusideat. Täältä voidaan alhaalta ottaa tää lue lisää megatrendeihin sijoittamisesta. Täältä päästään tsiikaa suoraan noita iSharesin tuotteita. Täällä on sivuston alareunassa listattuna näitä erityyppisiä tuotteita. Löytyy digitalisaatio, ikääntymiseen liittyviä tuotteita, automaatio ja robotiikkaa, sitten ilmastonmuutokseen, väestörakenteeseen ja teknologiaan liittyvää. Että täältä löytää kaikki kerralla aika selkeästi omien otsikoiden alta. Ja löytyy myös linkit tähän, että jos haluaa lukea lisää aiheesta, niin voi käydä täältä tsiigaamassa. Ja toki näitä tuotteita voidaan myös hakea sitten täältä ihan tästä ETF-työkalusta vaikka suoraan. Niin voidaan täältä valita vaikka kategoria ja ottaa tuosta esimerkiksi uusi teknologia. Käydään tuolta poimimassa rahastoyhtiö. Niin sitten saadaan saman tien esille nämä hakutulokset tähän liittyen. Ja voidaan tässäkin näitä järjestää sitten vaikka tuoton mukaan. Et klikkaa tuota saraketta kerran, niin näyttää sitten korkeimmasta tuotosta alaspäin nämä. Ja samaten kulujen ja vastuullisuuden perusteella voidaan etsiä näitä. Ja tästä pääsee suoraan myös kaupankäyntiin. Jos tosta klikataan ostan nappia, päästään tänne kaupankäyntinäkymään ja täältä sitten voidaan ostaa niitä. Klikataan ostaa ja valitaan tonne sitten se oma tili, mihin niitä ollaan ostamassa. Ja siihen määrä ja hinta. Ja samaten jos käytte täältä sivulta tsekkaamassa näitä, niin täältä päästään suoraan myös ETF klikkaamalla vastaavaan kaupankäyntin näkymään. Eli hyvin simppeli kuvio noita etsiä tuolta ja ostaa. Ja sitten tietysti noilla kaupankäyntikoodeilla löytyy myös täältä, että voidaan hakea tuosta vaikka joku eri tuote, vaikka tuo automaatio- ja robotiikka ETF. Päästään sitten jättämään toimeksiantoon ja voidaan tästä katsoa vaikka graafista tuottoa vuoden alusta tai sitten pidemmältä aikaväliltä mahdollisesti. Ja näkyy tosiaan täällä alareunassa sitten tarkemmat tiedot rahastosta, vähän jakaumaa ja miten se jakauma alueittain sijoittuu. Ja suurimmat omistukset ja kulut löytyy täältä talousasta, että on samannäköinen tämä sivu kaikilla näillä tuotteilla. Että tosiaan, jos tuosta otetaan vaikka seuraava tuote, niin voidaan täältä tsekkaa myös vähän, miten se on vuoden alusta kehittynyt ja nähdään jakauma-alueittain ja sektorit ja täältä kulut ja muut tiedot. Ja toki täältä voidaan sitten ETF-sivustolta esimerkiksi suodattaa nämä matalan hiiliriskin perusteella ETF:t ja hakea tuosta taas rahastoyhtiö, mitä halutaan tutkailla ja saadaan sitten hakutulokset tuohon näkyville. Ja voidaan taas tuosta vaikka tsiikaa, että mikä se olisi tuottanut parhaiten viime aikoina. Ne voidaan tuosta, jos haluaa kulujen perusteella tsekata, niin voidaan samalla tavalla järjestellä sit niiden perusteella. Ja tosiaan ylipäänsä tuosta löytyy myös ei-toivottuihin omistuksiin löytyy suodattimet tuosta ETF-sivulta. Voidaan täältä ruksia, että mihin ei haluta sijoittaa ja sitä mukaan sitten saadaan hakutuloksia. Ja tästä sitten, jos halutaan jotain erityyppistä lähteä hakemaan, niin käydään tuolta klikkaamassa vaan, että tyhjennä hakuehdot, niin päästään takaisin lähtöruutuun ja on kaikki vaihtoehdot saatavilla taas. Tuleeko tähän ETF-sivuun liittyen jotain kysyttävää tai kaupankäyntiin liittyen? Joo, siinä edessä.
Mikä se on se kaupankäyntikulu? Onko se sama kuin osakkeilla?
Joo, kyllä, että menee markkinapaikan mukaan.
Niin mä kysyn kaupankäyntikulua.
Joo, eli sama kuin osakekaupassa, eli menee markkinapaikan mukaan. Että nämä on Saksassa listattuna kaikki.
Löytyykö muita kysymyksiä vielä sieltä takaa?
Kiitos. Milloin saatte nämä megatrendit iSharesit tuonne kuukausisäästämisen piiriin?
Se on hyvä kysymys ja se on valitettavasti kysymys, mihin mä en osaa nyt vastata suoraan. Että toivottavasti saadaan mahdollisimman pian, että voidaan toive laittaa eteenpäin totta kai. Hyvä kehitysehdotus kyllä. Se olisi kätevä kun ne saisi sinne.
Sitten ei ilmeisesti enää täällä yleisössä, mutta oli tosiaan tuommoinen lisäkysymys tullut tuolta internetin kautta. So there was a follow-up question from the internet. With counterparty risk, I meant the next dip. When the next dip comes and possibly defaults on banks, are ETF owners protected from BlackRock being bankrupted?
That's a great question. Yes, definitely. So the ETFs sit in separate fund companies and are completely segregated from BlackRock assets. So you're not exposed to any risk in terms of the financial well-being of BlackRock as a firm when you invest in our ETFs. So just to make that very clear that if BlackRock goes bankrupt, you will not lose your assets. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that concludes very well this whole presentation here. So if there's any more questions left, I think this was it. Thank you for being here.